Welcome back to the Shadow Journal. Imagine it is 1967. You are standing in the heart of a triple canopy jungle in Southeast Asia. The heat is an ocean-thick, heavy, and suffocating. The air is so humid you don't just breathe it, you wear it. But then, the natural symphony of the jungle goes silent. The birds stop calling. The insects vanish. You hear a low-frequency vibration coming from the horizon. A fleet of C-123 transport planes banks low over the emerald canopy. They aren't dropping napalm. They aren't dropping paratroopers. Instead, they release a fine, shimmering mist from their wings. In the morning light, it looks almost beautiful rainbow-tinted spray that catches the sun like a gentle dew. It settles on the leaves. It seeps into the soil, and it coats the skin of every soldier and villager below. To the men on the ground, this mist was marketed as a miracle of modern science. It was the tactical defoliant, the promised weed killer that would strip the enemy of their cover and expose their supply lines. The military commanders called it a lifesaver. The chemical companies told the boys in olive drab that it was harmless. They said it was as safe as common table salt. They were lied to. The soldiers played in the mist to cool off. They bathed in the empty 55-gallon drums. They ate their rations on soil soaked in the oily film. But as the sun set over those defoliated hills, a silent, invisible alchemy was taking place. The leaves didn't just wither. They turned black and curled like scorched parchment. The water didn't just clear. It died, becoming a stagnant soup of toxicity. And the men were bringing a ghost back home in their blood. Tonight, we unseal the dossier on the most lethal chemical legacy of the 20th century, Agent Orange. This is not a story of conventional warfare. This is a chronicle of the rainbow of death. We are looking at a classified history of how corporate greed and military desperation merged to create a molecular nightmare of poison that doesn't just kill the living, but hunts the unborn. We are unsealing the files on dioxin, the most toxic small molecule ever synthesized by human hands. A shadow that has no expiration date and no mercy. The paradox of Agent Orange begins in a laboratory, not a battlefield. In the 1940s, during the heights of World War II, botanists were looking for ways to regulate plant growth to win the food war. They discovered a growth hormone that could make plants grow so fast they would literally grow themselves to death. It was supposed to be a revolution for agriculture, a way to feed a starving world. But the military-industrial complex saw a different potential. They saw a way to turn the environment itself into a weapon of mass destruction. Operation Ranch Hand was born. Its mission was simple and chilling. Only you can prevent a forest. Between 1961 and 1971, over 20 million gallons of herbicides were sprayed. They were named after the colors of the stripes on the barrels. Agent Blue, Agent White, Agent Pink. But it was the one with the orange stripe that would become the synonym for hell. The military needed it in massive quantities. They needed it cheap. And the chemical giants Monsanto and Dow Chemical were more than happy to oblige. Internal memos from the 1960s show a terrifying truth. The companies knew. They knew the manufacturing process was being rushed at temperatures too high. This shortcut created a contaminant called TCDD, the purest, most stable form of dioxin. They knew it was a potent carcinogen. They knew it caused systemic organ failure. But the machines kept running. The barrels kept shipping, and the mist kept falling. To understand the horror of Agent Orange, you must understand the cold, calculated nature of its core poison. Dioxin, Most poisons are like fire. They burn hot, they destroy, and then they fade into ash. But dioxin is like ice. It is a persistent organic pollutant. It does not dissolve in water. It does not break down in the sun, settles into the fatty tissues of the body, and simply waits. It has a half-life in the human body of up to 11 years, and in the soil, it can remain lethal for over a century. When dioxin enters your system, it doesn't attack your cells like a blade. It hijacks them like a master hacker. It mimics a key that fits into a very specific receptor in your DNA called the R receptor. Once inside the nucleus, it reworks the very blueprint of your biology. It tells your cells to grow when they should stop. It tells your immune system to attack your own organs. It is a molecular ghost that haunts the instructions of life itself. For the soldiers returning to the United States, South Korea, Australia, and New Zealand, the war didn't end when they boarded the plane home. The nightmare began years later, often in the quiet of a suburban home. It started with skin rashes that wouldn't heal chloroquine. These weren't just pimples, they were disfiguring, eruptive black cysts that made the flesh look like it was rotting from the inside out. Then came the cancers. Not just one type, but a storm of them. Non-Hodgkin lymphoma, prostate cancer, multiple myeloma, respiratory cancers, type 2 diabetes. The veterans were dying in their 30s and 40s, their bodies collapsing under the weight of a war they thought they had left behind. But the most crushing blow, one that destroyed the ego and broke the spirit, was the betrayal of the next generation. The men came home, married their sweethearts, and tried to forget the jungle. But the jungle had followed them into their DNA. The dioxin had altered their germ cells. They watched in silent, screaming horror as their children were born with twisted limbs, missing organs, and profound neurological disorders. The rainbow of death had found a way to bridge the gap between the past and the future. In Vietnam, the scale of this tragedy is almost beyond the reach of language. Millions of people were exposed. For generations later, children are still being born in the hotspots, the areas near old air bases like Da Nang and Binh Ho, with deformities that defy medical logic. To this day, the soil in these areas is still screaming. The ghost is still there, waiting in the dust of the schoolyards and the mud of the rice paddies. The chemical companies hid behind proprietary secrets. The Department of Defense claimed there was no conclusive evidence. For 20 years, the victims were told it was all in their heads. They were told their cancers were just bad luck. They were told their children's deformities were a genetic roll of the dice. The files we have unsealed tell a different story. They tell a story of a deliberate choice to ignore the toxicity for the sake of the mission. It was the ego of a superpower refusing to admit that it had poisoned its own protectors. In the third act of this tragedy, we look at the paper trail, the archive of denial. By the late 1970s, the veterans were no longer silent. They were organized, they were angry. They began to realize they were all dying of the same rare diseases. They began to notice that their children all shared the same strange birth defects. They filed a landmark class action lawsuit against the chemical giants. The companies fought back with the cold precision of a corporate executioner. They argued that because the soldiers were exposed to so many things, mosquitoes, jet fuel, stress, you could never prove that Agent Orange was the smoking gun. They used shadow science to manufacture doubt, much like the tobacco industry had done decades before. But internal documents from Dow Chemical, dating as far back as 1965, tell a much darker tale. One memo stated clearly that dioxin was one of the most toxic materials known. Another, internal report admitted that the company was concerned about the long-term health effects on its own workers. They knew. And yet, when the government asked them if the herbicide was safe, they stayed silent. They chose the contract over the conscience. The U.S. government was no better. The Air Force conducted a study called Project Ranch Hand, designed to track the health of the pilots who sprayed the chemicals. For years, the results were massaged and manipulated to show no significant link to disease. They wanted to protect the military from massive liability claims. They wanted to avoid the embarrassment of admitting they had used a banned chemical weapon under the guise of a weed killer. This is the shadow's toll, not just the physical death, but the death of trust. When a soldier goes to war, there's an unspoken contract. I give you my life, you give me the truth. That contract was shredded in the jungles of Vietnam. The betrayal wasn't just in the spraying. It was in the 40 years of silence that followed. It was in the way the veterans were treated like complainers in the VA hospitals. It was in the way the Vietnamese victims were completely ignored by the international community for decades. The rainbow of death is the ultimate example of how power protects itself at the expense of the vulnerable. The files show that the military even considered using even stronger concentrations. They had Agent Purple and Agent Pink, which had even higher levels of dioxin. They only stopped because they ran out of supply, not because they found a moral compass. We are looking at a history where the environment was treated as a disposable stage, and the people, both friend and foe, were treated as collateral damage in a chemical experiment that went on for 10 years. As we reach the final act of this dossier, we must look at the world we live in today. The Huey helicopters are in museums. The orange-striped barrels are mostly empty or buried in rusted pits. But the rainbow of death has no expiration date. Agent Orange taught us a terrifying lesson. The battlefield has no borders, and time is no shield. We are living in a world of persistent shadows. The dioxins we released in the 60s are still in the food chain. They are in the fish of the South China Sea. They are in the fat cells of people who were uneven born when the last plane flew over the jungle. The ghost has changed masks. Today, we call them forever chemicals. PFAS, PFOA molecules that, like dioxin, do not break down. They are in our non-stick pans, our waterproof clothing, and our firefighting foam. We are repeating the same alchemy, using the same shadow science to claim they are safe until the bodies start to pile up. Look at the rain. Look at the soil. Look at the shimmer on the leaves after a storm. We like to think we are the masters of the earth, the brilliant alchemists of a high-tech future. But we are just children playing with matches in a library of ancient DNA. We strike the match. We enjoy the momentary light, and we ignore the smell of burning paper until the entire roof collapses on our heads. The mist of the jungle has cleared, but the ghost is still in the blood. It is a part of our history, now a dark, orange-striped chapter in the book of who we are. It is a reminder that every shortcut we take with nature comes with a price that our grandchildren will have to pay. The Vietnamese people are still cleaning up the hot spots. The veterans are still fighting for recognition for their children. The chemical companies are still making billions. The shadow hasn't vanished. It has just become part of the background noise of the 21st century. Tonight, as you sleep, remember the silence of the jungle after the planes flew by. Remember the rainbow that didn't lead to a pot of gold, but to a graveyard of the unborn. Remember that the things we do in the name of progress or security can echo for 100 years. The dossier is back in the vault. The wax seal is being reapplied. But the smell of the mist that never really goes away. The archive is closing. The shadow remains. Good night, and until the next entry in the Shadow Journal.